The story of Cain and Abel is one of the most ancient narratives in human history, yet its themes are just as relevant today. This powerful tale delves into the complexities of human emotions and the profound consequences when they spiral out of control. We are introduced to Cain and Abel, the first brothers, whose lives unfold as a lesson in the dangers of unchecked emotions, particularly envy, jealousy, and anger. At its heart, this story reminds us of the destructive power of inner darkness when left to fester. Cain's journey highlights the subtle yet dangerous progression of these emotions, showing how what begins as inner turmoil can tragically escalate into actions that leave a permanent impact. Throughout this story, we'll explore key moments, from Cain's internal struggles to God's compassionate warnings, emphasizing how critical it is to recognize and address these emotions before they take hold. Through this journey, we'll uncover how unchecked envy, jealousy, and anger can ultimately lead to irreversible consequences. If you're as intrigued by the psychological and spiritual insights within these ancient stories as we are, make sure to subscribe to our channel. This way, you won't miss our deep dives into timeless tales that continue to shed light on the human experience. Now, let's begin with the theme, Cain and Abel, how envy, jealousy, and anger can spiral into irreversible actions. Cain and Abel, as the first sons of Adam and Eve, were born into a world where they inherited a unique connection to both creation and divine purpose. In a time when humanity was only beginning to understand its relationship with God and the earth, these two brothers each followed a path that would reveal contrasting natures and choices. Cain, the elder brother, became a farmer, working the soil and cultivating the fruits of the earth. Abel, on the other hand, was drawn to shepherding, tending to animals with care and dedication. Each role reflected a different approach to life and a unique way of serving God through labor, symbolic of two paths that humans would come to follow throughout history. As they grew into their roles, Cain and Abel developed a sense of devotion that led them to offer sacrifices to God. These offerings were an expression of gratitude, a way to seek divine favor, and a method of acknowledging their dependence on a higher power. Cain brought the fruits of his labor, the produce of the land, as an offering. Abel, however, chose the firstborn of his flock, the best portions, demonstrating a deep reverence for the sacredness of giving. This distinction between their offerings reflected not only their vocations, but also their spiritual orientations. Abel's offering symbolized his acknowledgement of God's ultimate authority and his willingness to give generously from his heart, while Cain's choice, though likely sincere, did not carry the same spirit of sacrifice. When God looked upon Abel's offering with favor, but did not regard Cain's in the same way, a profound moment unfolded. This divine response to their offerings planted seeds of confusion, hurt, and jealousy within Cain. Abel's offering was accepted because it reflected a pure heart, while Cain's might have lacked a similar depth. This rejection did not go unnoticed by Cain, whose pride was wounded. Instead of seeking understanding or examining his intentions, Cain became entangled in feelings of rejection and resentment. His emotions, left unchecked, began to corrode his heart, turning his initial disappointment into a burning jealousy toward Abel. The story of these brothers, intertwined with the dynamics of love, jealousy, and divine expectation, set the stage for one of humanity's earliest lessons in the complexity of emotions and the struggle between self-reflection and blame. God's rejection of Cain's offering struck deeply, wounding Cain's pride in a way that he struggled to process. The pain of rejection, combined with Abel's perceived superiority in God's eyes, fed a growing bitterness. Cain found himself in a cycle of brooding anger, viewing his brother not as family, but as a rival in the quest for divine approval. As Cain stewed over his perceived failure, the rejection evolved from personal pain into a resentment he couldn't contain. He saw Abel not merely as his younger brother, but as a reminder of his own shortcomings, a reflection of something he lacked in the eyes of God. Instead of looking inward and questioning how he might improve his offering or his intentions, Cain chose to externalize his pain. This reaction mirrored a broader human tendency to blame others rather than taking accountability. Cain's wounded pride morphed into envy, with Abel serving as the embodiment of everything Cain thought he wanted but could not attain. This emotional upheaval stifled Cain's ability to self-reflect, clouding his judgment with a sense of unjust competition. In his mind, Abel had become a symbol of his failure, a target for the resentment that had taken root in his heart. Pride, a powerful force, held Cain captive, blocking him from seeing his own actions and leading him down a dangerous path of anger and bitterness. In the midst of Cain's brewing anger, God reached out to him, offering a moment of guidance and wisdom. God, aware of the inner turmoil stirring within Cain, did not leave him without counsel. In a compassionate yet firm manner, God warned Cain, saying that sin is crouching at the door, and urged him to master it. This message was a reminder of the power Cain held over his own emotions and actions. God's warning acknowledged Cain's struggle, but also reminded him that he possessed the ability to choose a path of peace, self-control, and humility. God's words were a pivotal opportunity for Cain to reflect and understand the gravity of his emotions. This moment highlighted a profound concept of choice, suggesting that even in moments of anger and resentment, one holds the power to choose a response that aligns with goodness. Sin, represented as something lying in wait, was not inevitable, but rather something that could be mastered through self-awareness and restraint. God's warning was not merely a reprimand, it was an invitation to self-growth, a gentle push toward examining one's inner self. However, Cain, consumed by envy and resentment, dismissed this divine guidance. Instead of heeding God's words and seeking a different path, he allowed his emotions to lead him. His choice to ignore the counsel sealed his fate, leading him down a road where his anger would ultimately drive him to actions with irreversible consequences. Cain's refusal to confront his own emotions symbolized the tragic consequences of allowing pride and envy to overrule the wisdom that calls for self-reflection. In choosing to ignore God's warning, Cain set himself on a trajectory that would alter his life and the course of humanity, illustrating the destructive power of unchecked emotions. Cain's growing resentment toward Abel was like a seed planted deep within his heart, buried under layers of frustration and discontent. As time passed, his inner turmoil transformed from a quiet irritation to a smoldering anger, clouding his thoughts and altering his perception. Abel, once simply his younger brother, became an embodiment of all Cain felt was unjust and undeserved in his life. The favor Abel received, the sacrifices that seemed to bring joy to God, all began to twist in Cain's mind, transforming Abel from a sibling into a rival, then an adversary, and finally a scapegoat for his own insecurities. The resentment was relentless, filling Cain's mind with a steady stream of dark, embittered thoughts. Each day, this resentment took a stronger hold, subtly corroding his ability to see Abel with love or compassion. In his eyes, Abel's success amplified his own shortcomings. Cain couldn't reconcile his feelings, and instead of addressing his struggles or questioning his own path, he found it easier to lay the blame on Abel. This festering emotion, left unchecked, warped Cain's very sense of reason. His compassion grew cold, his heart hardened, and his mind became increasingly fixated on a single thought. Abel had taken something that should have been his. Unchecked emotions, like Cain's resentment, hold the power to overshadow reason. Instead of approaching his pain, his jealousy, and his perceived failure with introspection, Cain let these feelings fester and grow into something dark and twisted. His disappointment grew into a deep-rooted bitterness, turning his view of Abel into something distorted and malevolent. This was more than just sibling rivalry. It was a grudge that he nurtured in silence, allowing it to evolve into an obsession that consumed his thoughts. Like a poison, it filled every crevice of his mind, erasing any hope for clarity, healing, or reconciliation. As his heart grew colder, the bitterness spread beyond his feelings toward Abel. It seeped into his very view of life, of justice, and of his place in the world. A dangerous cycle began to form, one where resentment fueled jealousy, jealousy fed anger, and anger stoked the flames of hatred. Without the light of self-reflection or the humility to seek guidance, Cain's mind twisted this narrative to suit his desire for vindication. His reasoning grew darker until he no longer saw Abel as family, but as a figure to be overcome, as if removing Abel could somehow resolve his inner conflict. The weight of Cain's emotions finally became unbearable, boiling over into a rage he could no longer contain. In a haze of frustration and resentment, he invited Abel to join him in the field. To Abel, this likely seemed like a simple, even brotherly request, a call to spend time together. But for Cain, this was no ordinary meeting. The field, empty and isolated, became a stage where the bitterness and anger festering within him reached a breaking point. Every unspoken word, every jealous thought, and every moment of resentment collided in this moment. Cain's actions were no longer driven by reason or love, but by an unchecked fury that had festered in silence. Abel, unaware of the depths of Cain's turmoil, became an unwitting participant in a tragedy that had been unfolding within his brother for years. The act itself was swift, impulsive, yet it carried the weight of all Cain's pent-up bitterness. In a single, irreversible moment, Cain allowed his rage to dictate his actions, and he crossed a boundary he could never return from. The act was raw, unfiltered emotion, a surge of hatred that ended in violence, marking the first recorded murder and forever altering the course of humanity. Through this act, the devastating consequences of unchecked jealousy, envy, and anger were brought into sharp relief. Cain's emotions, left to simmer and grow, had ultimately consumed him, leading him down a path from which there was no turning back. In his mind, he may have believed that removing Abel would somehow free him from his suffering, yet it only deepened the anguish, isolating him even further. In taking Abel's life, Cain lost a part of himself, a part that he could never regain. This tragic moment serves as a profound illustration of the destructive power of unresolved emotions and the irreversible nature of choices made in the heat of anger. The immediate aftermath of Cain's actions brought him face to face with a force greater than his own anger, the voice of God. Confronting Cain, God's question was both simple and piercing. "Where is your brother Abel?" In his response, "Am I my brother's keeper?" Cain revealed the depths of his guilt and his desire to evade responsibility. His response was not only evasive but deflective, as if he could deny what had transpired by rejecting any responsibility for his brother's fate. The question wasn't just a demand for Abel's whereabouts. It was a call for Cain to confront his actions, to see himself clearly, and to acknowledge the consequence of letting bitterness dictate his life. Cain's answer underscored a complete rejection of accountability. By attempting to deny his role, he revealed the guilt and shame now woven into his being. It was a reaction steeped in denial, almost as if, in refusing to admit what he had done, he could escape the reality of his irreversible act. But there was no evading the truth. God's judgment followed swiftly, condemning Cain to a life of wandering, a life cut off from the stability of community, from family, and from the sense of home he once knew. Marked by God, he became a reminder of the consequences of his actions, an embodiment of the pain wrought by unchecked emotions and impulsive decisions. The mark itself served as both a form of protection and a symbol of consequence, ensuring that Cain would not meet the same fate as his brother, but would instead bear the weight of his actions for the rest of his life. His punishment was not merely physical, but profoundly psychological and spiritual. He was condemned to live as an outsider, with the weight of his actions pressing upon him daily, a constant reminder of the loss of innocence, love, and family he had caused. The life he now faced was not one of fulfillment or peace, but one marked by regret, sorrow, and solitude, forever haunted by the consequences of a single act born out of a lifetime of resentment. The story of Cain offers a profound message on self-mastery and emotional control, illustrating how unchecked feelings of jealousy, resentment, and anger can lead us down paths we might never intend to take. Cain's emotional journey begins with a seed of frustration, which quickly grows into jealousy toward his brother, Abel. Instead of seeking to understand or process these feelings, Cain allows them to consume him. This chapter of his life serves as a cautionary tale for us all, as God's warning to Cain emphasizes the necessity of mastering our emotions rather than being mastered by them. Cain's story reminds us that our emotions are powerful forces, capable of shaping our lives in both positive and negative ways. When left unchecked, emotions like resentment and envy can distort our thoughts and lead to actions that not only harm others, but also leave lasting scars on our own hearts and souls. God's warning to Cain: sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it, i.e., echoes the message of self-awareness and vigilance. It serves as a reminder that we hold the power to choose our reactions. We can either succumb to the weight of negative emotions, or we can rise above them through conscious control and self-mastery. Unchecked emotions act like a poison, slowly affecting our perceptions, our actions, and our relationships. In Cain's case, his jealousy toward Abel grew so intense that it overpowered his sense of right and wrong, leading to a tragic outcome. This story invites us to reflect on how we handle our emotions, especially those we may consider negative. While it's natural to feel jealousy, anger, or resentment at times, these emotions can quickly turn toxic if they are not processed in a healthy way. The lesson here is clear. Emotions are meant to be felt, acknowledged, and ultimately managed, not allowed to fester and drive us toward harmful decisions. Self-mastery is an ongoing journey, one that requires patience, self-reflection, and intentional effort. It is a skill that develops over time, strengthened each time we confront our feelings rather than allowing them to control us. By actively choosing to recognize and address our inner conflicts and negative emotions, we become more resilient and more capable of living peacefully. Cain's story serves as a timeless lesson, a reminder of the importance of vigilance in managing our inner worlds to prevent them from spilling over into destructive actions. Forgiveness and humility are among the most powerful tools we can use to prevent bitterness from taking root in our hearts. When we examine Cain's story, it's clear that choosing a path of forgiveness and humility over bitterness could have radically altered the outcome. In a moment of perceived rejection, Cain chose to dwell on feelings of unfairness and resentment rather than seeking understanding or considering the possibility of growth through the experience. This choice ultimately led him to make decisions that would forever change his life. His story urges us to reflect on the choices we make when faced with challenging emotions. Forgiveness is a liberating act, a way of letting go of past hurts and moving forward with grace. Humility, on the other hand, helps us recognize that we are all on unique journeys and that comparison only fuels resentment. By embracing forgiveness and humility, we free ourselves from the burdens of bitterness and anger. In choosing these virtues, we gain the strength to prevent negative emotions from dictating our actions. Cain's story demonstrates the consequences of letting resentment fester, while also showing us a path of transformation through forgiveness and humility. Self-reflection plays a key role in managing our emotions constructively. Taking time to examine our feelings, to understand their origins, and to consider healthy ways of addressing them can prevent us from falling into cycles of anger and resentment. Cain's story encourages us to look inward, to seek guidance when we feel lost, and to let go of the pride that often keeps us trapped in cycles of negativity. Choosing self-reflection over reaction and forgiveness over bitterness can help us break free from destructive patterns, leading us to a more harmonious and fulfilling life. As we come to the end of Cain's story, the lessons become abundantly clear. Envy, jealousy, and anger, when left unchecked, have the potential to spiral into actions that can irreparably harm relationships, compromise our personal integrity, and rob us of inner peace. The story serves as a reminder that emotional control and self-mastery are essential components of a fulfilling life. In today's world, where we are constantly faced with challenges and comparisons, Cain's story offers us a valuable perspective on the importance of recognizing and processing our emotions constructively. These teachings are not merely ancient wisdom, but relevant and applicable in our modern lives. We live in a time when unresolved conflicts, both within ourselves and with others, often lead to lasting tensions and misunderstandings. By reflecting on Cain's journey, we are encouraged to examine our own lives for any lingering resentment or unresolved issues that may be holding us back. When we choose to confront our emotions openly and seek peaceful resolutions, we not only strengthen our relationships with others, but also create a sense of harmony within ourselves. This reflection is an invitation to take inventory of any unresolved conflicts or feelings of resentment in our own lives. Whether through prayer, meditation, or honest communication with those involved, taking steps to address these emotions can lead to profound healing and peace. The journey of self-control and inner peace is not always easy, but it is one worth undertaking especially when we seek to follow a path guided by faith and wisdom. In moments of anger, frustration, or jealousy, turning to God's guidance can offer clarity and a sense of calm, reminding us that we are never alone in our struggles. Ultimately, the story of Cain and Abel inspires us to rise above bitterness, to choose paths of forgiveness and humility, and to seek constructive actions over destructive impulses. It teaches us that we all have the power to shape our lives through the choice we make, and that by embracing emotional mastery, we open ourselves to a life of inner peace, growth, and harmony. Let us take these lessons to heart, using them as a foundation for our own journeys towards self-mastery and spiritual fulfillment. If these timeless stories and teachings inspire you, consider subscribing to our channel. Join us as we continue to explore powerful insights from the Bible, discovering the wisdom they offer for our lives today. Together, let's embark on a journey toward greater understanding and growth.